Hey everyone, welcome to another episode. So excited that you're here. If you're here, we're actually right in the middle of a series, and I would really encourage you because it's going to be really hard to jump in this particular series right in the middle. So it's all about how to facilitate groups, especially during the check-in process and how this works and how I've done this with the groups. And so what I would challenge you to do is really to go back a couple episodes to the first one in this series, and so that way you can really catch up because this one might catch you off guard. So just disclaimer, also second disclaimer, do not just run out and start doing this with other people, especially groups, especially if you're a group counselor, a group coach, group facilitator, whatever you want to call yourself, Sunday school leader, whatever. Don't just start doing this if you have not experienced this on an ongoing basis. Do not try to do this. I compare this to a doctor that has never performed a surgery before in his life and just starts reading about how to do it and then goes and cuts somebody open and tries to do a surgery. Like that's really when we're in group settings like this, when we go this deep, when we're trying to care well for one another, we really need to be able to experience that. And especially if we're in a group setting, there's so many other dynamics. It really does require training. It really does require time with other groups. It's not something that you just naturally take on. It literally does require training a part of it. So if you don't have that training, if you have not been in a group like that, come to Step Out and Thrive. We would love to have you. But B, there's also other places that you can check out. I mentioned some places in the very first podcast, so you can go back and listen to that. But we would love to have you, no joke, and Step Out and Thrive. We always have groups starting or continuing. Sometimes we have groups pop up, and you can experience appreciation and check in for the first time that way. So, with that being said, we mentioned the first choice that we give somebody with a check-in last week, and that's we can just be with you. And if you didn't listen to last week's episode, that doesn't literally mean what you think it does. So there's a lot of other choices with that. So if you haven't listened to that episode, go. Like, why are you still here? Go listen to that other episode or go watch that other episode. Okay. Now that we got that out of the way. Number two, and these don't have to be necessarily in a particular order. When you're offering this to somebody, again, somebody checks in, the group responds by asking curious questions, and then the facilitator or the lead person asks, okay, how can the group best be with you tonight? We can be with you. And we can do that in these following ways. We can also, and this is the second part that we're going to talk about tonight, we can listen to Jesus with you. Now, when I first heard this, I'm like, okay, that means prayer. Well, yeah and no. Okay, when we listen to Jesus, that is a huge skill that so many people have never done in a group setting. I can't remember doing this in a group setting ever before I got to Luke 10. And I'm sure there's other places and churches and Bible studies that do this. I had never personally been a part of it. And so this was a whole new learning for me. Like I knew how to listen to Jesus for myself. Like I've done that. We have a communication, it's back and forth. It's a normal everyday thing. It's just been like that for me. But I've not ever done that for somebody else in a group setting. Like I prayed for somebody else and I would put my hands on them and pray and just listen that way, but I wouldn't do it in a group setting. And so this was totally different for me. So what we do is somebody says, yes, I would love to have people listen to Jesus for me in this situation. And my follow-up question is always, well, tell me more about that. What exactly would you like us to listen to Jesus around? And that gives that person a chance to really clarify because they probably just shared a minute and a half of details, and y'all, that's a lot to listen around. So in one sentence, which is hard for people like me to do it in one sentence, but it can be done, y'all. It can be done. So give that person time to process, okay? But in one sentence and one sentence or less, how would you like the group to really listen on your behalf? And they'll share their sentence. And then what I encourage my people to do, whether they're on Zoom, whether they're in person, grab a piece of paper, grab a pen. Sometimes it's great to have Bibles nearby. What I try to discourage, and because it is weird and awkward and just weird, do not have phones. Do not have phones. I would encourage people, if they're in person, to have Bibles nearby. Okay? Because there's nothing weirder than being in a group with other people and somebody pulls out their phone and they're sharing a really hard situation and somebody's pulling out their phone, and I know they might be looking up a Bible verse. I know they might be meditating on a picture or something, but to normal people they could be scrolling Facebook. It's so easy. And for that one person on the phone, they can get distracted. They really can. It messes up the room for everybody. So I'm begging you, please, 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 don't allow phones during this exercise, okay? Just don't do it. Just don't do it. Now what you can do is you can have pieces of paper there, you can have pencils there, or you can just sit in silence. When this is done virtually, we usually have people turn the camera off and their microphone on mute and set a timer. It's up to that facilitator to come back on gently. Because remember, you're having these people have this moment with Jesus and you can't go on, hey guys. It's like gently invite them out of that moment and to share. And so they're listening to Jesus. I always encourage people to pay attention to SIFT, SIFT, which stands for sensations, body sensations, any body sensation that might change. To write that down. Images. Maybe you see an image that you normally don't see that's not in your regular field of view. Just take notice of that and write it down. Feelings. You could be feeling one way and all of a sudden you're feeling something else out of nowhere. Write that down. Thoughts, any thoughts that you're not thinking, that normal thoughts that just come out or that might come out, put that down. So SIFT, sensations, images, feelings, thoughts, and just really focus on that. Like, okay, God, I'm hearing that, I'm seeing that, I'm imagining that, I'm thinking that. Just write it down. And this is not necessarily to be shared yet. What I try to do is as they're having that moment with Jesus, I give them a moment like, hey guys, we're going to invite you back to the room. And then with my people, I usually say, whether it's in virtual or whether it's in person, I say, hey, take a minute and just look over that. And just ask Jesus, which one of those or which part of that list would you like to share? And sometimes there's only one thing. You might not share that. You might not get the freedom to share that. And that's fine. This also doesn't give you the freedom to give that to that person later because you just didn't want to share in front of the group. That takes value away from the group. Okay. That's my own personal. Some people feel differently about that. For me, and these small groups, keep in mind, this is a small group 7 or 8. If you're trying to do this with a group of 50, I would not do this method. Okay. I just wouldn't. There's another method for that. Maybe we'll get into that some other time. But for the small groups that you're really practicing this heart-to-heart connection with, when they come back into the room, I ask them to sit and look at their list and ask, okay, which of these would I like to share? And as they're sharing, I say, hey guys, we're all learning how to do this. We're all practicing. As far as I know, nobody for sure hears correctly from God all the time. Okay. So this is not thus saith the Lord. What I tell that person that's receiving this, I'm like, hey, try to emphasize. If it fits, awesome. If not, put it in a suitcase and just be aware of it. And sometimes I encourage people just to write everything down. If we're on Zoom, this is the one time that I, the facilitator, will record for that person if they want it. Okay. So you can do it totally different ways, however you feel like that person can get the information if they want it. They might not, and that's totally fine too. And so they're able to get the information, what those people say, and then they just hold that. And you might come back to them at the end after everybody's sharing and saying, how was that experience for you? And they may have something to just confirm about what people are sharing. I cannot tell you how many times that I've been with brand new groups. Oh, I love doing this with brand new groups. Brand new groups. And somebody asked, yes, I would like people to listen on my behalf about whatever. And they go listening for the first time. And I have people that like, I don't even know Jesus can like speak like this. Like, does God do this? Like, is this even a thing? And so I've had people just like scared to death about doing this. And then they go, and I've had groups before where 3 or 4 people will get the same image. And they're sitting there in silence and they're going, no, I got this too. Like I've had one group specifically that was in person where 4 out of the 5 people got the same image. And we even took a picture of it because we were all blown away that night that happened. And so it was just really, and it wasn't anything that's like, God's going to do this. It was more like this picture really just brought peace to the main person that was asking. And so it's just amazing how God can show up in those moments. Is that obvious in every time? No, no, it's not. But you practice this because this is something that we are given to practice. Listen to Jesus, just listen to what he's saying, and then share amongst other people what you hear him saying in this situation. Okay. And so it's very powerful to do. Some people have come up with verses that they try to look up. You can do that. You can have Bibles nearby for that part. So yeah, just really neat things happen. So it's just a place to experiment with. It's affirming, especially if it's done in the right way. A lot of times these practices can be done not in a safe way, where it makes either the person receiving feeling like they have to almost do what the person is saying for them to do. Anytime you receive words in these environments, it should be edifying to the whole group. It should be edifying to that person. Um, and so that's just something to be aware of. And again, this is why it's important when you're doing this type of work to practice with groups that have been doing this for a while, especially if you want to take on the leadership role. You need practice. You should not go into something like this without experiencing it over and over and over and over and over again, because you can do some serious damage. And that's why this is so important. If you've never experienced this in a group before, what I would suggest doing is first, well, I mean, come to a group, but if you can't, and I get not everybody can, okay, and you might be in a place where you're like, Bethany, this is way different than anything I've ever experienced before. I just want to practice something with one other person. That's great. Just do that. Get together with one other person that you trust and admire and is at the same maturity level, the same spiritual level, or even higher than you, and say, hey, this strange girl got on this podcast. No, you can recommend them to the podcast and they can listen to this and say, hey, can we just practice this together and see what God does and see how God shows up? And so have a situation and just listen and spend some minutes listening and then come back together and share what you heard. That's all it is. It's practicing. And you don't have to go out and walk that out. It's just like, okay, God, we saw this, we heard this, and be aware as you go throughout your day and your week. Be aware of what God is doing and be aware of how that image or how that time together has impacted you throughout the day. So hope this has been encouraging to you. If you've done this, I would love to hear about it. I would love to hear from you, and I would love to hear if you're practicing this maybe with your family. Really quick side note, I love practicing this with kids because kids can draw some of the coolest pictures and it's just amazing. So if you can do this even with little kids, you can ask a prompt. What if Jesus could say something to our family? If Jesus could draw a picture of our family, how do you think Jesus would draw us? If Jesus was in our family photo, where would he be and why? I mean, it's just so cool. And they're listening to Jesus and they're drawing things, and some things come out of that that you're just like, as a mom, it's blown me away. As a children's director, I used to do this with some of our kids. It's blown me away. So you can do this with kids too. Get creative with it. Don't put yourself in a box. Allow yourself to experiment and get creative with it. And again, with groups, it can mean heart to heart connections like you've never experienced before in your life, and not just with one another, also with yourself and with God. It's an amazing experience. So would love to hear from you. Feel free to let me know how this goes for you. You can email me, Bethany@stepoutandthrive.com, or find me on all the socials. So again, have a great week, and we'll cover the next one next week. Bye, guys.